Hello, and welcome back to, after a long break, our weekly share, which is normally on the Parsha with the commentary, Yalshach and others. But as you will, those who've been following it, despite the interruption, will know we were doing the journey from Egypt to Mount Sinai, leading up to Shavuos. On Shavuos, or the day before, I was actually traveling to Los Angeles, so I'm afraid I didn't do something there for obvious reasons. However, you will also have noticed that for a few weeks before that, there was no share. And so I must apologize. I was in a car crash, quite a big one actually. And my car, as me driving it, was hit by somebody else from behind at a very high speed, demolishing the car. It's now a write-off. It is totaled, as they say over here in America, and the airbags deployed, punching me from the side, punching me very hard on the left shoulder, and it took a while to go over it. So I'm back now. So apologies, and we're going to try and continue. Let's start with our dedications as we normally do. Oria Chaim Ben Chani Yehudis is a little boy, remember, who was waiting for a lung transplant. He's been in hospital and wasn't doing well. I tried to find out before recording this how he's doing now, but of course his tefillahs, or our tefillahs rather, for him are always, I think, necessary and important. So Oria Chaim Ben Chana Yehudis, for Rafal Chaim Ben Sora, who's doing well, Baruch Hashem. Mira Riva Bast Sivia, a very brave young lady who's recovering from or dealing with a very serious condition, and is making Aliyah, is going to go to Eretz Yisrael, an astonishing thing. A young lady from a different country, but she can make Aliyah, and the Israeli health service will look after her and her medical needs. So, kol hakavod. Chazal say shina mokum shina mazel. If you change your location, you very often change your luck. So, as she's been going through some tough times, this should have exactly that effect for her. Chaim Mordchadov Ben Esther should also have a refuah shalima, which takes us to our shir. So, on the build up to Mount Sinai, that's when the car crash and the disruption happened. And so this shir, I'm going to call after Sinai. What came after Sinai? Now, if you recall, just to give you a brief summary, we were looking at exactly how it was that Avrohom and Moshe, both of them managed to reach such an incredibly high spiritual pinnacle before the Torah was actually given. And one of our answers was that they had within themselves, we all do, I think, called a neshama, a soul, by, as it were, getting in touch with that, that was able to help them to overcome the limitations of being a mortal human being, a physical human being. It was a bit vague when I was reflecting on it, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to take you into some deep waters, and then we're going to see what happened after Sinai, or what should be happening after Sinai, and the very interesting digression, or apparent digression, to the concept of the Moshiach. So that's what this week's share is all about. So let's turn first of all to Chelik Dalet of Michtav Miliyahu, Rabbi Dessler's famous work, and it's on page 162. And to understand what I've been trying to say, or make it easier, make it clearer, in other words, use somebody else's words instead of mine, there's an essay here on page 162. It's called Mahus HaKishuf, the concept of Kishuf, black magic, in Judaism. And there's no doubt that there is a concept of black magic in Judaism. And the Torah, one of the things that the Torah outlaws is black magic in all of its forms. Now, there is no outlawing of the Torah. That doesn't say anywhere, don't eat broken glass. And people just don't do that, or don't walk through walls, because we can't do that either. If the Torah says don't do kishuf, it must be doable, it must exist. Now, some people say it's only sleight of hand. However, most opinions say that it really was a real thing, because of a concept from Shlomo HaMelech, Zul u'mazu bar Elokim, like a scale. For every positive, there's an equal opposite negative. And Avodah Zarah in its time, idolatry and Kishuv, which the Rambam refers to as being merely a branch or manifestation of Avodah Zarah was exactly that, a reality which would balance and compete with Nevius, a negative force, a negative manifestation for a positive manifestation. Let me take you to a wonderful Rabbi Dessa, which I think will make this very clear. Deep stuff. Kol hayedias tobas elonim b'chutz. Anything we perceive of, which is outside us, magias el torasena derech hamoyach, reaches our mind, reaches our consciousness through our brain, obviously. The eyes, the stems from the eyes go into the brain. I'm getting visual signals now looking at the screen as I record this from signals passing to my brain. If I hear things, it's signals passing to my brain. If I feel things, etc. Okay, so any knowledge, any awareness, any consciousness that you reach, which is outside you, then it comes inside you through the brain. Gam regush senu, moitzin ali diamach, and our feelings. That's the obvious feelings of a human being, senses of a human being. They all come through the brain. Okay, but fila halev mekabel mamach, even the heart comes through the brain. I'm not sure if he means romantically or whatever. But it wasn't always like that, was it? Puzzling statement. The first statement is clear and unchallengeable, and I suspect that it is. But the second one is very, very confusing. It wasn't always like this, was it? Again, we're saying that anything we perceive, anything we understand, which is outside of us, comes inside of us, comes into our consciousness and our understanding through the vehicle of our brain. But it wasn't always like that, was it? The Gemara says in Nida, Lamadama base Melamenis Lona Shakol, Odom Behiasa Uber Me Imoy, Seifa, Mabin Misofa Olam at Seifa. It is able to see Misofa Olam at Sofa Olam. Now, when I was a younger man, I used to conceive of this as being like a tour of the world. That Hashem took the soul of Odom Rishon, as indeed the Medrash says, which essentially is all of our souls, and shows us the entire world. He starts, of course, with Scotland, and then moves, east, let's say, to France, the Alps, Italy. So it shows him the whole of the world, but that's not right, because this should be shown that from one end to the other end doesn't work when it's a circle, because a circle or a sphere doesn't have a beginning and doesn't have an end. So it doesn't mean spherically. It's not a tour of the world. It is instead a tour of time, from Sofa Olam at Sofa, from the beginning of the world to the end of the world. So everything that happens in the world was shown to us inside our mother's womb before our brains were identifiably a brain, certainly nothing as complicated as the machine that apparently fully developed around about 24, 25, when it's only 24, 25 weeks. Then we still understood all of this. But listen to the next bit, because this is interesting. But not only does it teach you all of human history, so you see the whole story of humanity, but rather, in top of that, you're shown the whole of the Torah. You're taught the whole of the Torah. And as Ben Bagbag says at the end of Pirkei Avos and Perek Hey, turn the Torah over and turn it over again, because everything's in the Torah. Therefore, you were shown the entirety of knowledge. That's big. And all this you understood without a brain. Your brain's not fully formed. As Rabbi Dessa states the obvious, and obviously that didn't come through the brain. You didn't need to struggle to achieve this. It was done without the physical normal processes, as say through the brain. And how was that? Well, let me ask a different question. If that is the case, then what happens next? So we've got this whole medrash. It says that an angel comes and that's a little indentation in your top lip. Taps his finger. Angels don't have fingers, so what does that mean? But anyway, you forget it, and you forget the whole process, and then you have to relearn it. What's the point of making you forget it? Because it's easy to relearn than to learn for the first time. That's the general idea. Now, says Rabbi Dessa, that you're born, then the brain, as it were, occupies its role, takes its role on the stage of your life. And basically it says, now if you want to understand something, then you have to do it through me. You want to see, you want to hear, you want to remember. It's all through me. So here's a difficult question, and I usually phrase this badly, so I'll try and get it right this time. What, therefore, is the role of the brain relative to the regime that existed before the brain was activated or even truly in existence at all? And the answer is, it's a barrier. That infinite amount of knowledge, that infinite amount of understanding, which obviously overcame the boundaries of time and the physical world, was available before you came into the physical world. But when you come into the physical world, then by definition, it's a different setup. The brain and physicality takes its dominant position. Consequently, you have to use your brain in order to achieve what was freely available to you without a brain before you were born. As soon as you come into the physical world, you're contained and constrained by the physical world. Now, as Rabbi Dessa here is talking about Kishuv, black magic, he quotes the Rambam, who says that magic, what do people do? People who engage in magic usually get themselves into a state of hysteria. Like think of twirling dervishes and various. You've ever seen documentaries on this subject too? You know, they inflict all sorts of either use drugs or whatever to change the state of consciousness. They're basically, for a few seconds, breaking free from the limitations of the physical self to enter a super or ex-physical self, physical state, and therefore freed from the body, they get glimpses of all that knowledge that was there before. Because Avodah Zarah, black magic, Israel can do stuff. At least when Avodah Zarah did exist, which there hasn't been in the world real Avodah Zarah for the last 2,000 years, but it did, and potentially does exist as a true concept. How does it work? By simply leaving the constraints of the physical world, the rules of the physical world behind. It's something we do when we go to sleep at night, when your soul goes up to heaven. That's why dreams can be prophetic. You've seen stuff. That's what we've been talking about with regards to Avram and Moshe Rabbeinu. In the previous weeks, we've been talking about how Avram Avinu was able to conceive and perceive of the entire Torah because it was within himself. He has a neshama in himself. That was the neshama. That was the soul that was being taught by the angel. It's now constricted by the physicality. But he broke down. He broke through that by a strict regime. There is no course in this. I can't tell you how to do this. I don't know how to do this fully. But it's a pathway by which you deny the physical world dominance over you by rejection of what the physical world demands of you. All the lusts, all the passions, all the desires. And we said, if you remember, the Gemara said that Avram managed to get himself to such a state where he saw himself as offer for aper, dust and ashes or nothing, dirt. He was nothing. No I, no ego. But Moshe Rabbeinu saw himself as being absolutely nothing at all. And we're going to pursue that in just a second. But that's what we've been learning up till now. Another good way to focus this quick synopsis is, if you remember what Rav Shlomo Wolbe said in Ali Shar, I think it's around about page Ayin Test, where he says that in volume 2, where he says that at the time of his great teacher was Rabbi Yerucham of Mir. Rabbi Yerucham's great teacher was Rav Simcha Zissel. And Rabbi Yerucham reported that at the time, that's in mid-19th century, when Charles Darwin started publishing his theories about evolution, that men were descended from lower life forms, descended from the ape, etc. Then he was asked, what did he think of Darwin's theory? And he said he thinks that it was a perfect conclusion, a reasonable conclusion for Darwin to have reached. And the reason is because Darwin based his research and his conclusions on observing human beings. The problem was, said Rav Zissel, he's never actually seen a human being. So if he was observing human beings like him, which are like most people, it's a reasonable assumption to say that they're not too different from animals. I, however, said Rav Zissel, saw Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, and I can assure you that no human being was descended from an animal. But there's a huge statement, no human being. Within, therefore, every human being is this process we've been talking about. Is the soul, is an overwhelming genius, and spiritual genius is usually not realized or even being made aware of. Jean-Paul Sartre, the famous French philosopher, famously said, modern man has a God-shaped hole in him. And that's a very fair analysis of the 20th century and the 21st century. People are simply unaware of the existence of spirituality. But those who are would be aware that if you really touched and come close to the life of somebody truly great, truly holy, then you will see a totally different type of human being, or a total type of creation. That's where we basically got to. Fine. So our job is to come to Mount Sinai and to get the Torah, and then essentially to build a Beis Hamikdash in the land of Israel and be a beacon to the rest of the world, signaling Torah values, ethics, and morals to the world, a light unto the nations, as the prophet says. No, it's not. That's only, an ersatz version. So let me take you to Ali Shar, which a lot of this year has been based from. And let me read some absolutely astonishing things to you. And now we come to the Moshiach. Our journey, after all, is from Egypt to Mount Sinai. Of course, we blew it by making the golden calf, or participating, or tolerating the golden calf. That's for a different share. But certainly, the golden calf totally derailed our journey, which was supposed to be, well, we're going to talk what it was supposed to be in a second. But that should have been the fulfillment, really, of the role of the Jewish people, had it not gone terribly wrong. But here is in page Ayin Vov of Ali Shar Chedek Beis, an essay by Rav Shlomo Wolbe called HaMelech Moshiach, the Moshiach. So he says, Moshe Rabbeinu nimtzach chekov ad Melech Mashiach. Moshe Rabbeinu is just a continuation, as it were, of the line that stretches from Avrohom Avinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, to the Mashiach. And he says, Mina hechroch v'harkiv bir ha'hevdo ben shis alfin shnin, shalom hazeh v'tekuvas yimas Mashiach. I have to spend some time, he says, telling you the difference that of the regime that will exist in the world from the first 6,000 years. If the Mashiach's not come by then, it's only a 6,000-year world, and we are heading very fast towards the end of that 6,000 period, as you know, if you look at the Hebrew date. So therefore, what is the difference between the pre-Messianic era and the Messianic era? So, Adam Rishon, he says, Adam Rishon hoya masugul latakin sa'oravish ba'olam al yidei amida ben asayin shal pisei adnachash. Adam Rishon had been able to reach, to bring the world to complete perfection had he not stumbled with the story of the snake in the Garden of Eden, which of course, I hope you realize, is not to be taken literally. The snake was not a snake, Adam Rishon was not a human being as we understand a human being. Oh, it all happened, but the imagery that conjures up and the reality as we imagine it, when you talk about a garden, you talk about a snake, that was certainly not true. As I said to you many times, I've shared before, the Gemara says that Adam Rishon, when he'd been created, the Malachi Ashuras, the ministering angels, we'll come back to them in a second, mistook him for God. He was not a human being as we were. But anyway, in that reality, in that dimension, however you want to define it, the world would have been perfected had only Adam Rishon not did what he did. Now, read on a little bit more. And this is very, very important. Adam Rishon Hoya, and I told this is deep stuff, so we happen more warned, don't go into deep water unless you can swim. That only Adam Rishon withstood the challenge of this snake interaction thing, or snaky interaction might be a better way of putting it, turning into an adjective supposed to a noun. Then Elo Omad Hoya Amatzashul Tchesamesim. Had he stood, then the world as it will be of the resurrection of the dead. Don't focus on dead bodies coming back. Just think of a different stage of existence in the world, a completely different reality in this world, a completely different world, not the world that is not going to appear the way it is now. That, after all, for a creature of light, which Adam Rishon was, on such a level that the angels mistook him for God, he would have to live in a world which itself was fitting for him on that level. When he goes down, the world goes down too. After Tchias HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead, then a totally different regime will apply and a different world too. This is clear. The world that we know now, in which there is choice, cause and effect, good and evil, choose between them. Hoya ze matzah shel tchisa me. Sorry, next line. Bechira skarbanish eno tachlis achrona. That's not the final word. That's not the ideal stage of the world. That is a pre-stage of the world. Had Adam Rishon not messed it up, the world would have reached this new stage, which we'll call the Tchias HaMesim dimension. So, but when the Tchias HaMesim, the Moshiach comes and Tchias HaMesim happens after that, then it will return to that ideal state. Now, Achmiri battle is called Harav Shemaim. So we've not done a very good job of getting rid of evil from the world and choices between good and evil, which we generally see humanity failing to make the positive choices. Pisum Yoba al Hecholo Ha'odam Asher Atom of Action. This is the Novi Malachi in Gimel Aleph. Suddenly there will appear somebody. Pisam, suddenly. Yoba el Hecholoi Ha'odam Asher Atom of Action. The individual, the one who you were longing for. The Moshiach. One of the 13 principles of the Rambam is you've got to believe and long for the coming of the Moshiach. Fine. So, that, says Rav Shlomo Volba, quoting that passage from Malachi, that is that is our belief, our religion, and our perception, our understanding. Adam Echad will be one person, possessing a great soul. Shalom B'Kol Mini Shlemas, who has perfected himself, worked at it. Who Yiro Lanushas Mahu Shir Kamosa Ba'amita Shal Odom. He will show and demonstrate, reveal, if you like, to humanity a completely different side of themselves. Just like when you perceived inside your mother's womb without a brain, your sentience, your self-awareness is not constrained to a brain, then there'll be a revelation of you in a totally different dimension. And everybody will perceive that. This battle called Kethatnas or Kanisa Shulara, and as a consequence, all the nonsense and all the insanity of evil will be apparent and transparent to everybody, and therefore die. Through the greatness of the Moshiach, a person will be inspired and realize the potential and the greatness within him or herself, and allow that to come to the fore, not just pushing the current state into the background, but annulling it altogether. Now, that's all a bit much. So let me take you to another piece of Shlomo Volma, which is the Medrash Rabbah. It's also Gemara. And the Gemara says the following thing. So he says, Aleph, Mashiach, Yoram me Avrohom. The Medrash says that Mashiach will be greater than Avrohom, and it will be greater than Moshe, and he will be greater than the Malach Ashereth? In what sense will he be greater than those three? So here we go. Aleph, HaMashiach Yoreh Avrohom Shehoya Dorish U'Manaseh Be'elokis Be'gar Gerim Be'eretz Nimrod Al Korchel Shomelech. Well, the story of Avram Avinu is that he rebelled against an all-powerful king, a member who tried to have him killed by being burned alive in a furnace. Of course, the problem for Nimrod, the king, was that Avram was right, so flames didn't have much effect on him. But he was an all-powerful king, and he couldn't stop Avram challenging his demand that the world is sunk into a perspective and belief in Avodah Zarah, the ultimate correctness of Avodah Zarah. No, it's not correct. The planets and the forces of the planets, which is Avodah Zarah, which allows them to manipulate those forces to do incredible things, to balance the Kedusha we talked about before. That's nothing, says Avram Avinu. And Nimrod's not very pleased about that. So what did he do? He managed to get hundreds and hundreds of converts. So therefore, the Moshiach, but even though Moshe Rabbeinu made hundreds and thousands of converts, but the Mashiach will convert, if you like, the world. So we're talking scale, not well, I suppose we have to be talking about the quality of it as well, but it's the scale of what Mashiach is going to achieve by bringing people to a recognition of God is, will, as it were, make Avram seem just like a practice round. Base. But Nosim and Moshe, he'll be higher, says the Medrash, than Moshe. That he presented himself in front of another all-powerful king who denied the existence of God. And his job, his role, he's a shepherd, the lowest, certainly in the eyes of the Egyptians, Shalanoshim, the lowest. And Moshe was scared of him, and managed to somehow extract the Jewish people from the furnace of Egypt. But the Mashiach, Moshiach Yasi Yosmi do much more than that. She is I'll call Malchi al Elam Kula Lahitzi Yisrael Miyodam Asas Nakoma Begoyim. He will convince all the kings of the world, all the regimes, all the parliaments, all the prime ministers, presidents, dictators. Suddenly there'll be an incredible revelation of truth. They will recognize that truth. Every Jew will be allowed to go back, including the lost 10 tribes, to the land of Israel without opposition, indeed with great applause. And all the opponents, the great enemies of the Jewish people, will be finished as a consequence. Malach Ashereth, angels. Govern me Malach Ashereth, that the Mashiach will be greater than them too. Because they are very, very keen, interesting, the Malach Ashereth, in redeeming the Jewish people. They want to do it. So they're very, very constrained. But he will do much more than that. We're talking about Chochmah, and it will be that the wisdom of Mashiach will be the greatest of any human being in history. Because Avram, who God referred to as his beloved one, and say a new path for humanity. And Moshe and Moshe was closer to God than anybody. And Malach Ashereth made being small, and the Malach Ashereth is surround God on all sides. None of them, even Moshe, none of them will be as close and full of understanding of Hashem as Moshe, as Mashiach. Whoa, interesting stuff. I can't resist taking you into a little bit more, he says here, because it's an interesting idea. You probably know the Rambam says that anybody who predicts who the Mashiach is and when the Mashiach is coming, well, the Rambam's very, very dramatic in his prescription for such people. They should die. They should die. I'm not going to go into why, because it'll take too much time from what we want to say, but that's what the Rambam has to say. The Chasam Sofer, he says that the Mashiach, even though if you were to ask me or ask any religious Jew, who do you think is likely to be the Mashiach, that would probably point to, some great tzaddik, to which the Chasam Sofer says, no, it might be an ordinary person who's imbued with tremendous siyata d'shmaya, divine inspiration, and suddenly his mind is opened, and he just understands all these books, and all that knowledge pours into him, like the knowledge of the Torah was poured into Moshe Rabbeinu. Lahavdil, there's a wonderful set of videos which I was once directed to on YouTube of a black Londoner uh, who is a autistic boy, and he was taken in I mean, autism seems to have almost supernatural, in fact, definitely supernatural, or can imbue supernatural abilities on people who suffer from it. There is this black boy who's taken in a helicopter ride of the whole of London, the panorama, we've all seen this, the River Thames, the Houses of Commons, etc. And then they just put him in a huge room, white walls, and give him, a big box of pencils. And he completely, perfectly, to scale, in every single minute detail, renders what he saw, almost like a video. And they've taken him to Jerusalem, and they've done it in Manhattan, etc. His brain just, like a camera, records this, and he's able to reproduce it. Wow. Well, not so wow, bearing in mind that the neshama has the ability, your soul inside you has the ability to absorb all knowledge, as we said, and the whole of history, and much more. That, as it were, is going to be opened up at the time when Moshiach comes. But there's a very interesting idea here, and I think it's well worth looking at. He says the following thing. So he says, let me find this place here. Oh, Rabbis Metanayim Haggadayim Hayabali Malacha. It's interesting to know that some of the greatest Tanaim were just, what they did for a living. Yochanan and Sandler, mended shoes. They worked in the fields. They did all sorts of rather mundane jobs. Haramban, Rabbeinu Yonav, Rabbi Yehuda Levi, or Yerofim. So the Rambam, Maimonides, Nachmanides, Rabbeinu Yonav Gerodno, the author of the Kuzari, they were all doctors. And they are Rizal, great Rizal, Abesh, the Baal Shem Tov, Agro, Nevil Nagon, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, Achovetz Chaim, and the Chazon Ish, Lo Kehena, Karabonim, Al Rosh Yeshiva. They occupied no position of authority. They had no titles. There was the Chofetz Chaim at Yeshiva, but he had appointed a Rosh Yeshiva. He wasn't the Rosh Yeshiva. The Chazon Ish, no formal position. The Vilna Gaon had no formal position. So he asked the question, how could it be? These are people whose very word defined the direction of the Jewish people. The authority. Where did they get such authority? Says this is the very definition of the essence of a true Odom HaTorah personality. They don't need to have the title of Rosh Yeshiva to achieve greatness. The Moshiach, when he comes, going back to our Chasam Sofer, doesn't have to have, as it were, an incredible lineage of a direct descendant of Vilna Gaon, of Baal Shem Tov, or Ben Ish Chai. It's from within themselves. Now, let's go over the page. Going into more deep stuff, and this is related to what we said at the beginning. Quoting the Ramchal, Moshe Hamletzato. This is deep and fabulous. My brain's still being tickled by the first time I saw this one. At a time when Hashem allows his presence to be understood in the world through miracles, so that the entire world can see it, to show that God is present in the Jewish people and constant there. When it calls man Abayas Rishon Bashim, that is to say, the time of the first Beis HaMikdash and the second Beis HaMikdash, particularly the first Beis HaMikdash, when there were 10 miracles, the open miracles that you could see every day. The cloud that came from the Mizbeach, the cloud of smoke from the Mizbeach, even in a windy day, stood straight, unimpaired, unaffected by the strongest of winds, and others. But that manifestation of God is something that's external. It's something you see outside us. It's an effect on nature, and we're watching that, as it were, from outside. Perish, she'ein kan giloi ela mitzad p'ules levad mikoyach hamoksim v'naris. Its only effect is that it's a bending of nature, or a suspension of nature. That's to say that if it wasn't for those miracles, people wouldn't believe. So you need something which is external and superficial, is the word I should have been using. But that's not the tachlis, the ultimate manifestation or a desire for a gilu to have, for a revelation of God to have. That God wants his presence in the world to be perceived through external miracles, suspensions of nature. That's only it's almost like a warm-up act. Carrying on, the Matzah Ravi, but at a much greater level, she is Gala Kodesh Baruch Hu called the Brios of Mitzada Yedia, but Abahasoga Lo Mitzada Moshe. That the people should realize and understand and perceive the Hashem in the world, not from, I was almost going to say tricks, but that's the wrong word, not by supernatural phenomena or miracles, but they should understand God through riba hadas, through incredible opening of knowledge and understanding and perception, to see things that have never been seen before. The knowledge of God, as it says in the Messianic time, will cover the world like an ocean. And when the Jewish people come back and take possession of the land of Israel at that time through the Messianic era, that will unleash the dam that holds back that flood of knowledge, which will engulf and make people rise to the surface. We will no longer need external miracles in order to substantiate belief and knowledge of God. But knowledge of God itself from within us. Again, by the perception that all the Nevi'im talk about, and that the angels have. They'll realize God from within themselves, as angels do, as prophets do. And there'll be no doubt in the world left. He goes on to say something tremendously interesting. The Rambam, maybe read a little bit more to you. Yeah, I'll read a bit more. So therefore, we now got a very good perception of the difference between realization or understanding of God through the vehicle of the Beis Hamikdash or through the Moshiach. The Beis Hamikdash, as he said before, at the time of the Beis Hamikdash, the miracles, the perception of God was realized through miracles. Okay, but that's something which is external to us. But you must Moshiach Yagila Yachta Yechidoi Mitzat Adasa Soga Belizikum of Amasim Bazos Hayatachlis. But when Moshiach comes, it will come from within us, and that's the tachlis, that's the high spot, that's the ideal. Anything else is just essays or essays towards the full book. Reading of the writing of the full book. And with that, he famously says, the Rambam in his Yachazoka, Yud Aleph, and Hilchos Malachim, and it's Halacha Gimel, if I remember rightly, famously says that when the Mashiach comes, Don't think he's going to come with armies to conquer the world and also some incredible miracles, because miracles are something outside people. Rather, it's going to come from within. The Moshiach will come. And the important thing, as we said in the previous page, when you see what's inside the Moshiach, that opens up what's inside you. It's a whole new conception. The conception we said before, when they asked Rav Simcha Zissel, what did he think of Darwin? He said, a perfectly reasonable conclusion for somebody who's never seen a man, but I've seen Rabbi Salanta. That concept that will be multiplied exponentially when the Mashiach comes. We will understand from within ourselves a whole new concept and a whole new way of looking at things. That's something, as we said at the beginning of this journey, that Avrohom Avinu achieved before the Torah was given. It's something that Moshe Rabbeinu achieved before Hashem first spoke to him. Something he continued, of course, to refine and grow within himself. That's what's going to happen when Mashiach comes as well. The coming to Mount Sinai, had we not made the mess of the Eglazov, that would be the time when the world would have come to that realization then. When, famously, it says in the Pasuk, build for me a base of Mishkan, and I will dwell besacham amongst them, then it's the base of Mikdash, or the Mishkan, is, as we just saw from Rosh Hashanah, a plan B. Plan A is Hashem will be in them. We will realize Hashem in us. And all the evil and all the vileness of human history will simply come to a complete halt when we realize who and what we could be. And that's going to come through in Moshiach. I did promise you in the previous year that we were talking about the leadership of Moshe Rabbeinu. We're going to be talking about that next week. And so I wish you all a wonderful Shabbos. It's nice to be back. I'm fine. I survived the car crash. And I wish you a fabulous Shabbos.